What's the best diet for healing autoimmune disease? Let's talk about it. Hey health heroes, welcome back to Adamimmune, the channel about helping you improve your autoimmune health naturally. And today I am going to, well, it's going to be a little bit different. I want to talk about all the diets that you could be doing to lower your inflammation, the best and worst diets for autoimmune disease. But instead of just straight up talking about them, I found this video on YouTube from HackYourHealth, and I thought it would be a really great thing for us to watch it together.
Hi guys, I'm Erica. Welcome to Hack Your Health. In today's video, I'm going to compare different diets that are used for autoimmune diseases. And my goal with this is to just kind of highlight the similarities and the differences between these diets, because there's certain foods that are excluded from all of them, which then tells you that these are maybe the most important foods to avoid. And then there's other foods which are included in some and excluded in others. And this might be helpful for people who are either on one of the diets and are still having problems. These could be some foods that it's good to start with first when it comes to removing things. Or for people who are reintroducing foods, it might be helpful to start with those that are included on other diets as the first ones that they introduced, because those could be the most likely to be received well by people with autoimmune diseases. I also thought it might be helpful to compare these different diets, because for people who are just first starting to learn about using diet to improve their autoimmune symptoms, I thought that it might be helpful to start understanding the reasons underlying these diets, and that would kind of empower people to make good choices for themselves. As usual, this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. And this is just to help other people who are doing research, and I'll put as many references as I can in the description box so that you can go and read more about these things yourself and choose what seems to make the most sense to you. And I also might be biased because I did the specific carbohydrate diet.
I'm a little biased because I did AIP too.
For me, the other diets, I didn't specifically do those diets, although they are very similar to what I did. But yeah, that's the one that worked for me, so that's the one I'll have the most knowledge about. So the diets that I'm going to compare are the Autoimmune Paleo diet, the Whole30 diet, the specific carbohydrate diet, and then I'll just go into a little bit about the Paleo and Keto diets, and then veganism and the Carnivore diet. So there's quite a few, so I won't try to spend too long on each one, but rather just give a general overview of that diet and what it's trying to accomplish and what it includes and excludes, and then we can compare them. So the Autoimmune Paleo diet, it is basically a strict version of paleo. And I have notes, so if I look down, I'm looking at my notes. So it includes meats, vegetables, sweet potatoes, fruit in small quantities, maximum 2 to 3 per day, fermented foods, honey and maple syrup, fresh non-seed herbs. So this diet excludes all seeds. It includes bone broth, vinegar,
apple cider vinegar, not just any vinegar.
Avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, and lard are the fats that are allowed. And string beans and snap peas are also allowed.
String beans are, I believe, a reintro, or at least should be. They're usually not a huge issue because they're like a really young legume, so they're not high in those toxins that are found in the other legumes, but they should be a reintro.
So what's excluded are nightshades, grains, rice, oats,
peas as well,
wheat, quinoa, all of those, dairy, eggs, legumes, beans, and peanuts are included in legumes, sugars, processed foods, butter and ghee, all oils except for the ones mentioned, food additives, alcohol, soy, onions, white potatoes, goji berries, randomly, and pepper-based spices. And I'm pretty sure the reason why pepper-based spices are excluded is because those are nightshades, like cayenne pepper and black pepper.
Black pepper is not actually a nightshade, it's a peppercorn. It's not in the same family, so it's a dried berry. It's not like the other ones. Just something to keep in mind.
Are also nightshades. The basic concept of this is to just remove anything that could be triggering an autoimmune response, basically, and to go back to how our ancestors would have eaten. So to eat a diet that's more resembling a diet that the human body would have adapted to during evolution.
Speaking my language.
A lot of things that we eat nowadays are things that they didn't exist before maybe a few hundred years ago, or even more recently in the case of processed foods. So the idea behind this diet, my understanding is that your immune system is probably more likely to be triggered by those newer, more unfamiliar foods.
It's not that just these foods are modern. It's that we weren't able to eat these foods in our past, our ancestors, in excessive quantities, right? So all these foods are high in toxins, right? And our bodies can't take enough. It can only take so much inflammation before it says enough is enough.
And is probably more likely to be calm in response to foods that your body can easily identify, digest, and otherwise deal with. The Whole30 diet, so far as I could tell, basically it included the exact same things as this Autoimmune Paleo diet for all intents and purposes. They made a little bit more distinction about fruit juice being included, but to me the main difference between the two was how they were implemented, so I'll get that in the next section of the video. So one other distinction between the two is that butter and ghee are allowed in the Whole30 but not allowed in the Paleo Autoimmune. And in the Whole30 there's a specific rule against eating foods that are a recreation of foods that you're not allowed to eat. So an example of that would be using coconut flour to make a muffin or another kind of baked good that's not allowed. So the Whole30 specifically says you're not allowed to do that, whereas with AIP it just goes into the foods themselves.
That's really interesting. I feel like a little bit of processed foods isn't a problem as long as you're not like overdoing it. It's not like all these coconut flour mug cakes make up a huge portion of my diet, right? They're an occasional treat, but they shouldn't be like a cornerstone in your diet or your lifestyle. You know what I mean? None of these foods should. We should be keeping whole as much as possible, though. So I like a good combination of all these diets, though. I feel like a lot of people on AIP do eat too many processed foods. For sure, there's a lot of different brands and companies that have started up things to help people, of course. So I wouldn't hold that against them, and I would certainly say use those foods transitionally speaking. You know, when you can, right? Especially when you're starting out, that's great. But try to ease back on your processed foods or overall. I think it's just best to be as whole as possible as a lifestyle. But don't worry. Use these foods as treats, though, if you want to do that.
Not necessarily specifics on what you use them to make. But other than that, these two, in terms of the food list, seem to be almost identical. So then we have the specific carbohydrate diet, and this diet focuses more on the kind of carbohydrate that is in the food, and it basically tries to remove complex carbohydrates. And the reason for that is because those provide the most food for the bacteria in your gut, which in the case of people with autoimmune diseases is often wreaking havoc. And it also excludes all refined sugars. So with the specific carbohydrate diet, you can't eat sweet potatoes or potatoes or any of the grains.
No sweet potatoes?
So any of the sugars, any of the food additives or processed foods. So it's very similar to the AIP Paleo. And the main differences are that on the specific carbohydrate diet, milk is allowed as long as it is either butter is allowed or fermented milk. So anything where the lactose is broken down. So that means that you can have the specific yogurt that you make yourself, not store-bought yogurt, as well as cheeses that are true cheeses that are, fermented. And so that means that
She didn't mention grass-fed. They should be grass-fed, right?
Lactose is very low.
That would be my
so
base.
Since the focus is on the kind of
if I ate those
carbohydrate in the food, that makes those fermented milk products acceptable on this diet. And for seeds and legumes, those are excluded at the beginning of the diet, but technically they are allowed just after a longer period of time. Another major difference is eggs. Eggs are allowed on the specific carbohydrate diet, but not on the Paleo AIP diet. But for the most part, there are a lot of similarities, and I'll get into why I think there are some differences later. Yeah, so that's the basics of the specific carbohydrate diet.
Interesting.
And if you want to have a list of all the foods that are legal and illegal, I'll put that in the description box, because they're very specific from food to food, which ones are and are not allowed.
Honestly, it just seems like a watered down AIP. I feel like, you know, if you were on this specific carbohydrate diet, you'd probably have to go to AIP, or at least take some of its ideas from that to find healing. I know she used the specific carbohydrate diet to heal her her autoimmune diseases, so I'm not talking bad about it at all. I mean, maybe that's the way to go for some people, but if you started there, you may have to go to AIP though, so I don't know. Maybe just start at AIP in the first place.
So then we have the vegan diet, which when you Google autoimmune diet, you seem to get a lot of vegan results, so that's why I included it. So in a vegan diet, obviously, you're excluding all animal products and all animal-related products like honey and stuff like that. So veganism,
don't like veganism.
in my perspective, is a fast, simply because it is arguably impossible to get balanced nutrition on a vegan diet because of the nutritional deficiencies. And if you want to know more about those, you can watch my Is Veganism Really Healthy video, because I went more in depth about it there. But people do have good results some of the time on a short-term vegan diet. So I think it's worth including.
I like her.
However, on a long-term basis, I personally think that veganism is quite dangerous as well, because it has so much fiber and so much
lack of nutrients,
compounds that can be difficult for people with autoimmune diseases to handle. I think that this one really stands out from the others, and it really involves a lot of carbohydrates, for example, and starches, because without meat and dairy, or at least meat, you end up having to get a lot of calories from plant sources, and the plant energy is, for the most part, carbohydrates. So for the rest of this video, I'm probably going to not focus so much on the vegan diet, since it's kind of an outlier.
Appreciate
here.
that.
And basically, I would say that you can do your own research about that one, and just
can do a keto, but
and then we have the carnivore diet.
It's going to be deficient.
So the carnivore diet, I see as sort of the ultimate autoimmune diet, basically because it seems like people who can't tolerate the most foods could potentially end up on the carnivore diet purely through exclusion. And of course, Michaela Peterson would be the
she can't eat anything
of that. So I think that
beef only,
including, because you never know how severe. I mean, I'm making this video for autoimmune diseases, and I don't know how severe each person's autoimmune disease is who's watching this. And it's possible that there are others who are so responsive and reactive to different kinds of plant food that the only thing they're left with is this kind of beef and water diet. And I think that it's important for that to be presented in a way that, you know, if that ends up being the case, you're not crazy. However, I think that that's probably not necessary for the
most people,
majority of people with autoimmune diseases.
If you have to, you got to do what you got to do, though.
I just think that it deserves to be included, since it's worked for such extreme cases that were not responding fully to things like a paleo or an AIP or a specific carbohydrate
Definitely shouldn't be
diet.
the first step.
So then there's keto and paleo, which are more considered like lifestyle diets, which have no specific end date. And basically, paleo is very similar to the AIP diet, which is a version of paleo. And then keto focuses on reducing the number of carbohydrates in the diet to approximately 50 or less grams of carbohydrate per day to keep the body in ketosis.
50 is the top.
And it's more
That's where I'm
focused
at,
on
usually.
weight loss.
Lately, a lot lower, though.
So I feel like it would be better for a person with an autoimmune disease to focus more on including foods that affect their body and their symptoms in a certain way, not necessarily on how many grams of carbohydrates they're eating in that day, but more so on the kind of symptoms they're experiencing. So that's why I felt like keto and paleo, though they're really similar and great, might not be specific enough to autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like really it would be pointless to do keto without first mastering AIP or another elimination, whatever elimination diet you want to do, if you want to do the specific carbohydrate diet, because there's gonna be tons of foods within that diet that are gonna trigger you, and you're gonna have a hard time triggering those, and it's gonna be hard because you're already gonna be restricted on this keto or paleo. Well, let's say keto. Speaking directly to that, you're gonna be eating a lot of foods that are directly against these foods again. So again, mastering something harder is gonna be a lot better first, and then going to keto, because it's just going to be a way of eating within these guidelines. I think that's going to be the easiest way to go. But let's
have a slightly
keep
different kind
listening
of
here.
Purpose. So
I'm sure you're frustrated. I keep pausing
there can be great success on those. The kind of guiding principles of the AIP or the specific carbohydrate diet might be more useful in the sense of really watching for symptoms. So some of the commonalities between these diets that we can see are nightshades. Although the nightshades are technically allowed on the specific carbohydrate diet, it's kind of a caution area and they are excluded from the other diets. Legumes, once again, they're included after about 3 months on the specific carbohydrate diet if tolerated. And
never get on paleo.
They are excluded from the Whole30 and the AIP. So this would be an area to watch out for. Grains are excluded on all of these diets, except for veganism, which we're not including right now.
No, we're not.
So grains are a real problem for many, many people with autoimmune diseases, and same with sugars. Preservatives, emulsifiers, and other elements of processed food are excluded from all of these as well. And those can also have effects on the intestines and its permeability. So those are very important to avoid for people who are trying to heal leaky gut as a source of their autoimmune issues. Nuts and seeds are another common exclusion, which again on the specific carbohydrate diet, it suggests you could try reintroducing them after 3 months and see if they're okay. If they're okay, then you can include them. And
really
if they're
same
not
with
okay, then
AIP.
Obviously, you shouldn't. And on the AIP, they are
common
excluded.
paleo food.
And of course, the main differences are the dairy, the eggs, and the reintroduction practices with these diets. So I think that these are really helpful guiding principles for people who are adjusting their diet to deal with an autoimmune disease. And in my experience and personal opinion, keeping a food journal is a really important step at the beginning.
That's good advice.
So I kept a food journal for 30 days when I first started the specific carbohydrate diet.
I wish I had.
And basically that was just to find foods that were legal on the diet but were not good for me. So I would highly suggest doing that. And there are also certain molecules that are found in various plant foods that can be irritating to people with autoimmune or leaky gut issues. So those are things like phytates, lectins, oxalates, and fiber. And
Solicitate. It could be any toxins, any food in excess amounts.
On those topics.
Even small amounts, depending how sensitive you are.
Beyond the length that I'd like to make this video. But if you're having trouble on any of these diets, I would suggest keeping really close track of the individual foods that you're eating, whether you're eating them cooked or raw, and basically pay really close attention to those foods, because sometimes it might be the case that there's just 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're including in the diet which might be causing symptoms.
Yeah.
And
one thing could be keeping you from remission. Keep that in mind.
Easier time. And if you're just being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and you're looking into diet, I would just say that I'm very excited for you and I wish you all the best and encouragement. In my case, doing this was definitely the best choice that I could have made, and the reason why I make videos about it is basically because I hope that other people will have hope, and even though it's very hard, I really hope that you can find foods that work for you. And all the best on your healing journey.
Yeah, definitely subscribe to her, guys. She's a smart lady. She's adorable. So definitely go check her channel out. I've been really enjoying it lately. She had a rough go just like I did. Her autoimmune disease really messed her up, and she lived a pretty miserable life before she put in remission with her specific carbohydrate diet. But with taking some ideas from AIP. So most of her videos, if she's talking about the SCD, the specific carbohydrate diet, she also puts AIP friendly or with AIP plus AIP, whatever. Maybe it's because AIP is more well known. I'm not sure. It seems like AIP is becoming the gold standard in elimination diets, though. So whatever elimination diet, make sure you. I don't know. I'm not against that or anything. I'm totally all for elimination diets. You got to do what works for you. I would recommend AIP though, just because it's a little more complicated. It's a bigger system. It goes more in depth on a lot of different foods, and it has a lot of more I feel like it's more restrictive, which is even better. The more restrictive the diet, the better. Of course, not when it comes to veganism or carnivore. Although carnivore, like I said, I've gone on about that enough. I honestly, I feel like I can relate more to the carnivores than I can the vegan people, these plant-based people. And a lot of the time I do just eat meat as a meal, or even there's days where I just eat meat. So while I'm not like fully carnivore, I'm definitely certainly meat-based. That's the smart way to go. Well, hopefully that you found this helpful. I get a lot of questions of what's the difference between keto and AIP, but I think this kind of went into depth in all the diets, all the different autoimmune diets. And yeah, if you found this helpful, definitely drop a like, maybe smash that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. If you want to help support me and this channel directly, you can go to my Patreon down in the link in the description and sign up. It's just a couple bucks a month. I'd really appreciate it. Throw that my way. Help feed a hungry Adam. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time.